and welcome to another Jew and Gentile podcast. I am your host, Chris Katulka, and with me is none other than the Jewish sage himself, the one, the only, Mr. Steve Herzig. What are you thankful for this Thanksgiving Eve, Steve?
I'm thankful that you reminded me this morning that Jewish people invented Thanksgiving. Another thing. One more for the team.
Here I am. I'm just a righteous goy reminding you that the Jewish people, they keep producing.
Unbelievable. We had chapel this morning. You were the speaker, and you reminded all of us as you took us through, yes, the book of Leviticus, and reminded us of the Thanksgiving offering way before any Turkey Day, football, any pilgrims, although all those things are good. It was the Jewish people in the Torah.
That's right.
That we have the first Thanksgiving. And of course, food is associated
100%
with lots of meat. Lots of meat.
And God wants you to eat and
invite other people.
To say thank you to God. He says, do something for me. Just come to where I am at the temple or the tabernacle, bring food, offer it up to me, and then I want you to take the thing that you're saying thank you for to me and to give it to other people.
But 40 loaves of bread, that's too much. How do you carry 40 loaves of bread and a goat or a sheep?
A goat, a sheep, you have to haul that thing. It takes sacrifice.
It takes planning.
Yeah.
We're not good at that. We didn't invent that.
Nope. But the thing that was interesting about that in Leviticus chapter 7 is that actually you brought both unleavened bread and leavened bread. It allowed you, which is very unusual in an offering to God, that you would have a leavened product and an unleavened for sure, but a leavened product. And so God was saying, bring it all, have a great time.
You know, we invented mishmash. Have you ever gone to a deli, got matzo ball soup with kreplach? That's called mishmash.
I think we should do a podcast from a deli.
Oh,
we should do a podcast from a deli.
That would be great. I was just Sunday in Connecticut. The church folks, after the service, took Alice and myself. We were in a deli, and the lady didn't even know what mishmash soup was. I said, you got matzo balls? She said, yes. I said, you got kreplach? She said, yes. I said, you got noodles? Yes. I said, put them all together? Mishmash. So leaven, unleavened. We invented that too.
You are the man, constantly inventing. Hey, we've got a guest today. We've got Pastor Neil Tamba, pastor from Northwest Bible Church in Dallas, Texas. I'm going to bring him on now. Neil, how's it going? Great to see you. Happy early Thanksgiving Eve.
Good morning, guys. I'm so glad to be here again, and we're over here getting ready for another big Thanksgiving at the Tamba house.
What are we having? That's what I want to know. White meat, dark meat? Are you a wing, a leg, a thigh, or a breast?
Well, I'd prefer not to have turkey altogether, and I think we're managing actually to sneak in some form of beef.
All right.
That's American Thanksgiving right there.
That's a Texan Thanksgiving.
That's Texan.
Now, football or no football?
No football, Steve, but we are having 30 total people at our house. Every Thanksgiving, we invite people that we know from our church, our community. Last year, we had people from 7 different countries around the world. The other night, Veal and I said, hey, before we over-invite, let's talk about who already we've invited. We said we're going to limit it to 24 this year. We counted up. We'd already had 27 invited.
That's amazing. Hey, Steve, can I tell you the very first time I ever heard Neil speak, I'll never forget it. This got to be 2005 or something like that. I was down in Dallas. I went to his church for the very first time and heard him. And Neil is an LSU grad. Okay. So Neil gets up, and in Texas, if you're not from Texas or you're not from the South, where I grew up in Philadelphia, we didn't talk about college sports. But down in Texas, it's a culture down there. And so Neil gets up, and he goes right for the jugular right away because LSU won the game, and the entire church, I'm talking there's got to be 1,200 people out there, maybe even more. They start booing, and they scream "Hook 'em horns" or "Gig 'em" for what's "Gig 'em"? That's
Aggies,
that's
the Aggies,
A&M, or the Texas Tech. I mean, everybody was in a ruckus, all because Neil got up and just really stuck it to him and just said LSU won this week. And so he might not have football on his mind during Thanksgiving, but I will tell you something. It certainly makes an impact when he reminds everybody he's an LSU fan. So,
college football, especially in the South, it crushes NFL followers. It really does. Yeah. I mean, there's passion. The passion is unbelievable. I love going down south and hearing whatever their alma mater is, because whatever it is, they're the best.
Yes.
It doesn't matter we're the best. So I'm sure for Neil, LSU is all in everything.
Well, you're a fish out of water there in Dallas, Neil, as an LSU fan, huh?
Yeah, that's right.
But
and if LSU loses and somebody says something to me, I just say, hey, y'all, I'm here to worship Jesus. I'm not getting any personal comfort and self-worth from 19-year-olds that I don't know who play football.
Only if they win.
That's right. Just to let you know how true your statement is about the South, my Eagles are my football team, and when we went to the Super Bowl and beat the Patriots in 2017, it's a day to be remembered. It's the first Super Bowl we ever won.
Hey, they put their quarterback, a second stringer, made a statue for him.
I know, he's over there. It's like an idol over there at the stadium. But I remember I was doing ministry, and I had my daughter with me, and we were flying back. That night, the Super Bowl was going on, and I had to land in Birmingham, Alabama. So I'm at the airport, Super Bowl day, biggest, commercial day possible. And I show up to see a TV. Can I get a Super Bowl on TV in this airport? Bupkis. No, I walk into this restaurant where it has all the TVs. They're all the Food Network and everything else. And I say, can we get the Super Bowl on down here in Birmingham Airport? And they go, what are you talking about? I go, the Super Bowl is on. They're like, we have no idea. We're Alabama only. We only do They gave me a little Putski television like this that I could watch the Super Bowl on. So anyway, that's my Southern story with football.
There you go.
All right, well, we're with Neil. Before we get started, Neil, you're in Texas. I think this is a great conversation for us to have here. As we think about Jewish people, kind of this transition that's going on. Neil, Steve found this interesting article about Jewish people feeling uncomfortable about some of the decisions that are being made in public school. And this actually might surprise some of our listeners, but Steve raised a good point. So, Steve, maybe you want to start this off and we can have a conversation quickly before we get to Judges.
Well, Chris, I'm often conflicted. I'm a schizoid. There's the Jewish side of me and the Christian side of me. So, for instance, Martin Luther, I wish he was never born from the Jewish perspective, and I thank God for him as a Christian. And the reason is he was anti-Semitic, wrote all kinds of awful things that Adolf Hitler used. When I read the headline, Texas Jews are deeply concerned about Christian material in proposed public school curriculum. The Christian side of me, they want to bring back the Ten Commandments. They want to talk about Jesus as the Messiah in their curriculum, and it passed 8-7. The Christian side of me, that's good. Bringing God back into the classroom is a very positive thing. However, the Jewish side of me recalls very clearly growing up when I was learning about Jewish Christian, in quotation mark, relations. I realized that whenever a government entity, doesn't matter the country, whenever they go to the far right and use the Bible, it always happens that the Jewish people will be persecuted in the name of Jesus, because we, according to some, killed Jesus. Now, you're a Gentile. You could accuse me, my people, we killed Jesus. Do we put a period at the end of that?
No, we put a comma.
Okay, and what comes next?
The whole world. Put Jesus on it. Well, the Romans, too.
Yeah. I just was in Connecticut, very Italian area I was at. I asked, raise your hand if you're Italian. Oh, all kinds of hands go up. I said, has anybody ever called you a Christ killer? No, confusion on, no. I said, you did it.
Yeah. It was you.
We said do it. We rooted. We were in the stand saying, do it. But you did. We didn't. Okay, but there's a comma after there, right? It's the Romans. We said do it. The Romans did it. But wait a minute. What about me? Pastor Neil did it. You did it. I did it. But there's still now you go and, no comma, and the purpose of the gospel was that God sent his son to die on the cross. So, but the point is, from a headline point of view, the Jewish people in Texas are concerned that their kids are going to be looked at afresh as Christ killers and as a group of people who turned on the Savior of the world and therefore are cursed, and it's justified to persecute them. It has happened everywhere in the diaspora, the scattering. Everywhere we've been, when something like that happens, it spells trouble for us. So I understand. As a believer, bring the Bible. We love the Bible. We at Friends of Israel are passionate about God's word and compassionate to the Jewish people. That's a biblical perspective. But not all people who use the Bible use it necessarily for good things.
Neil, what are your thoughts? You're down there in Texas.
Yeah. First thought, I wonder if it would be more helpful to talk about a curriculum that was based on Judeo-Christian values.
Yeah.
So but nobody's asked me. But there's a thought. The other one, I do think, I already heard about this week. Somebody saying, I can't believe they're doing this. And we had some relatives in from the north, and man, they were not happy about this. But I think there's an opportunity here for Christians. And Chris, we've talked about this before. If we have a proper view of the Jewish people, as Steve just said, as Christians, when this comes up, I think we ought to really lean into it and say, hey, I just want you to know, as a follower of my Jewish Messiah, Jesus, I am so thankful for the Jewish people. As a matter of fact, I want to say thank you, because it is your people who kept alive the belief in the one true God and protected the holy scriptures that God gave us, the Bible that has the 10 commandments. And every time, and I've said that many times as a beginning conversation with Jewish people, every time I've said that to a Jewish person, they actually take a breath, they're surprised, and they feel like I've complimented them, and they say thank you, and we end up having a great conversation because that's my true heart. So I think whatever the government does here, we as Christians ought to think about, how am I going to affirm and love Jewish people?
My question to Steve is this. Do you think, we're the time period that you grew up in as an Orthodox young man, the Christian world at that time was still grappling a lot with anti-Semitism. We've come a long way in the last, 60 years. A long way.
Or have we?
No, that's a great. Yeah. Well, I'm talking about in evangelicalism, maybe.
No.
Okay, good. Challenge me.
No.
I just know that there's a large movement of.
If most of evangelical Christianity was Pastor Neil's and Friends of Israel people and others that we know who love the Jewish people and would amen what Pastor Neil said. However, many of the things we're reading now, we're on college campuses, we're in various countries. Canada, we read that headline last 85,000.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that today.
85,000 Quebecians going crazy. This is anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
So I don't know how far we've gone, but Pastor Neil's right. I'm echoing what he's saying. Yes, there is a great opportunity. I'm only trying to bring up so that our listeners, all 7 of them, understand that Jewish people might not be excited, and they're not usually excited whenever the Bible is brought into the public arena. They would defend the right in churches, etc. That's fine, but don't throw it down our kids' throats when we're not asking for it. That's what they're going to say.
Yep.
Now, to me personally, as a believer, a Jewish believer, the 10 Commandments, having the 10 Commandments posted in some schools where condoms are being distributed free, that's I want
you
the
want
10
that,
Commandments.
yes.
I want that there. But I understand. I understand why people are afraid. But it does present a great opportunity. The Pastor Neils, the you, me, the Friends of Israel, our 7 listeners have an opportunity in that kind of environment that said, look, the government passed this, but we want you to know that we thank God for the Jewish people. A Jewish man changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I was never the same from when I met him. And I thank God for every Jewish person I meet. We could say that. And I hope it's mentioned in every Texas classroom where this is taught.
You know, this is a great opportunity for me to say, we, especially at Friends of Israel Gospel Ministry and the Friends of Israel's Jew and Gentile podcast, it's our desire to push back against the anti-Semitism, to talk about our passion for God's word, leading to compassion for God's chosen people. And that's why, before we get to Judges, we just want to say we're starting our end of the year campaign. And Steve, we have a name for it, actually.
Yes.
Are you ready? You're going to share it?
Actually, it came from this podcast.
That's right. It came from this podcast and sitting in that seat right over there.
Sitting in that seat right there. You tell the story.
Yeah, so we had Jordan Sutter in, and she was talking about the internship that she's doing, and Friends of Israel, FOI Equip, which is what the Jew and Gentile podcast is connected to, is funding her to be an intern to engage with the Jewish community around her in a very Jewish area of Pennsylvania. And so Steve asked her the question, why did you do this? Why did you get involved as an intern? And Jordan looked and said, because Chris asked me. And it hit Steve really hard. And that's why we're naming this campaign, because you asked. We can't, we're going to ask you. We want to raise...
We're not apologetic. We give stuff free. And we're still going to do that. By the way, 424-444-1948 will get you 50 stickers, no problem. But we are asking to help us so that there could be more Jordan Sutters, because she's 3 months sponsored. It's a paying position. And we thank God for 8 interns that we have now. The courses that we teach, the material that we put out, the tech that we use. That doesn't always work, by the way. But all that, we need funds in order to do that. So we are asking. So because of Jordan Sutter, we're saying, we're asking.
Yeah, we're asking you. We want to raise $25,000 by the end of the year, and the $25,000 is not going to the Jew and Gentile podcast. Like Steve said,
we're going to still dress the sloppy way we do.
That's right.
There's nothing that's going to improve to us.
The funds, though, are going to go to raise up new workers, train people in Jewish ministry, get them involved in Bridges, Encounter, Origins, our volunteer missions trip to Israel, Hesed, the same thing. We do so much with North American Ministries, and we need your help to continue this. And so with the Jew and Gentile podcast is just the mouthpiece of all the amazing things that are going on to train and raise up new people, new believers, ready and excited to minister to their Jewish friends. And just like Pastor Neil said, he has conversations and gives thanks to the Jewish people he meets for for what God has done in his life. We want to raise up a new generation of college students and interns and workers, missionaries going out and sharing the good news of Jesus, the Jewish Messiah.
How could they give? Our 7 listeners, at least 1 or 2 of them are like me. They're challenged.
That's right.
We need help.
Well, it's really simple. You can go to
I still don't know where the show notes are.
I've already told you where the show notes are.
I still have trouble finding them.
Well, all you got to do is go to foiequip.org, and there's a donate tab right up at the top. So foiequip.org, and at the top you'll see donate, and that will send you right to our donate page where you can give to support FOI Equip and all of the various ministries that we have. Where again, we are asking $25,000 this year to grow and to expand the work that's going on here in the United States. Again, that's foiequip.org, and you can click on the donate page. All right, Neil, we are in Judges. And I know that you wanted to say something because you were a little miffed the other day because you heard.
Yes.
Ooh, miffed?
Yeah, is that the right word?
That's a good word.
Yeah.
I've never seen Pastor Neil miffed.
No, he was
He's always laughing. Miffed? That What do you look like when you're miffed,
Oh,
Pastor
I got
Neil?
the phone call. I got the phone
Of course.
call.
And did you tell me? No.
I
Of
did.
course not.
Of course not.
Now, time
I
out.
know nothing.
Time out. Just remember, I control all the controls here. I can silence all of you. I did tell you because you got on air with the podcast and you said, hey, guess what? I found our 8th listener. And I got not only Neil, it was very upset. I got at least a bunch of other phone calls from our 7 listeners saying that they thought they were the 8th. Look they were the 7, but they keep saying no, they're the 8th. But Neil is ready to say and stand right now and say he is the first person that said he's the 8th listener. So Neil, I'm giving you the floor right now, brother.
Thank you. So I want to say to all the other number 8 listeners out there, all 7 of you other 8 listeners, I want to say officially, I started this thing about the 8th listener a couple years ago. I know I did. I actually put a pitch for hats and T-shirts. I'm the 8th listener. That was totally ignored, and we did mugs instead, which is okay.
Ignored.
But let's just make it official. I am the 8th listener.
I'm not going to argue with that.
Me neither, but I like to see a miffed Neil. This is good. This is good.
Hey, so from now on, we say all 8 listeners. I know you're trying to do that Jewish thing with 7, but I think it's 8.
There you go.
Hey, listen, all I'm going to say is, as Steve would so aptly say,
sei gesund. Live and be well.
Okay, there you go. 8th listener. Neil, lead us, brother. We need you now. Take us to Judges. We're talking about Samson today.
Okay, we're going to go to Judges 13. If people are getting their Bibles out, they can go to Judges 13. And before Steve reads for us, I think it's really important just to have a little review and a setup here, because Judges 13 through 16, it's trouble. It is not pretty, even though somebody came up to me the other day and said, hey, I heard somebody preach a Father's Day on Samson and all the way Samson is a model for a good father. No, we're not going to say that today. And to really understand how bad it is, we just go back. The whole book of Judges is the downward slide of the nation of Israel. And we've said this, it's showing you this, as God's people trust God less and less and less, sin, pain, dysfunction, immorality, all of this increases more and more and more. And the sad deal is, as God's leaders go, so God's people. And you've got Samson, the last of the judges, and we'll just start his story here as we think about just his unrealized potential. Hey, before we read it, Steve, you're a baseball fan. I know we've been talking about football. You know who I thought about when I thought about Samson was Pete Rose. Yo, you know Pete Rose died just a couple months ago.
Yep.
And what was the big thing? Pete Rose did not get into what?
The Hall of Fame.
The Hall of Fame. Why not?
Because he bet on baseball, the forbidden sin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The guy, he had more hits than anybody else. He was called Charlie Hustle. You know, when I was a kid, we all us guys who weren't very good, we said, I could at least hustle like Pete Rose, you know? And when I read the article, I know this is kind of goofy. When I read the article about him dying and not getting into the Hall of Fame, he desperately wanted to. I just felt this sadness. And I thought, unrealized potential.
You know, Neil, there's one of my favorite videos that I watched over and over again is actually with Pete Rose. And it was just a couple years ago. It was 2016. Pete Rose is on TV with Alex Rodriguez and Frank Thomas, and they're standing at this fake home plate. And did you see this video?
No, I don't think so.
I'll have to show it to you. And there's Alex Rodriguez, okay? I mean, huge. And Pete Rose is this old guy, and they're asking him questions, and he goes, I got behind the bat, I went like this, and I held the bat like this. And they're all mesmerized watching Pete Rose, this older guy. It's that same mentality. I mean, these already superstars from the MLB are watching a legend, and they're taking note. I'll have to show you the video. They're taking notes. So again, what you're talking about is so real when you see Pete Rose. He was so memorialized in the MLB, but but because of what he did, it ruined his legacy.
Banned from baseball.
Banned,
He was banned. Mm-hmm.
And so we go to Samson, and here's a guy that shows us a couple surefire ways to make sure we live a life of unrealized potential. Not too good. Okay, Steve's going to read for us. Go, Steve.
Again, verse 1, chapter 13, the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord delivered them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. Now there was a certain man from Zorah of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and had no children. And the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, Indeed now you are barren and have borne no children, but you shall conceive and bear a son. Now therefore, please be careful not to drink wine or similar drink, and not to eat anything unclean. For behold, you shall conceive and bear a son, and no razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines. So the woman came and told her husband, saying, A man of God came to me, and his countenance was like the countenance of the angel of God, very awesome. But I did not ask him where he was from, and he did not tell me his name. And he said to me, Behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. Now drink no wine or similar drink, nor eat anything unclean, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb to the day of his death. And then dropping down to verse 24, so the woman bore a son and called his name Samson, and the child grew, and the Lord blessed him.
Yeah, what does that sound like when it says this woman who can't have a child is going to have a child, bear a son, and he's going to save God's people?
Yeah, there's a lot of connections, I feel like.
Oh.
Well, come one, you think of Jesus 100%, and then you also think of Abraham as well and his situation that he was dealing with.
That's right. So both from a Jewish perspective, if they're reading something and they're hearing, wow, something really special is going to happen. And even as Christians, we read this and we say, whoa, God, he's coming in his grace. He's about to do something. He's about to bring a savior. So by this point in the book of Judges, you are ready. You're ready for a Hall of Famer to come in and fix this thing, right? Now,
Neil, can I ask, I'm trying to jog
Yeah.
my memory. I think Samson is the only story of all the Judges where we get kind of a birth narrative to him. Like we get a background to who he is.
A lot of it, from more than most of them.
Yeah, and so, he, number one, occupies a lot of the space in Judges, but we also, we get this preparation of who he is, not even really so much what's going on in the background, but just this guy's going to come. You get a sense of a lot of potential for this person.
a lot of potential. You get a sense here God is wanting to bring his grace, right? Grace, 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 grace. And then we got to deal with this. I really don't think we can understand Samson's deal here without talking about what was a Nazarite, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so not only do you have God's grace coming in here, you have a unique call, God's call here. So what do we know about a Nazarite? Let's just kick that around. What was a Nazarite?
Separated, sanctified. He could not cut his hair, have his hair cut, and he could not drink, imbibe any wine. That talks about eating no unclean food, but everybody was supposed to not eat any unclean. That wasn't extra special. But the two other ingredients were very, very sanctifying, if you will.
And it also mentions Nazarites weren't supposed to touch unclean things.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Like corpses or dead bodies. And I mention that because there's these little moments of touching dead bodies. You're like, what's that about? It's about being a Nazarite. And the nation of Israel was not supposed to join themselves to foreigners at this point. And let me say something about that. It's not about what we think in our modern day terms of racism. Can you still hear me, guys?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's not what we think of in our modern day terms of racism. Again, this was God saying, I'm calling a people out for myself, and I don't want you all to be like them. That's the deal. So, no drink, no cutting your hair, no touching unclean things, corpses. That's the setup. So here's what you have: God's unique call, God's grace in Samson's life. And the question is, will he live up to those things? Will he take advantage of them? So,
Can I say something too, Neil?
please.
The idea of and when you see that glitching, Neil, that's just on our end. So we still hear
Okay.
you. When you think about the Nazarite, in the law, a lot of what's going on in the law is the issue of it's this spectrum that you live by as an Israelite. Everything wasn't a sin, but you could be impure, but that doesn't make you it doesn't make it a sin, but you could be impure. So like when you have enter into that relationship with your wife, it's not a sinful thing to have that relationship with your wife, but you become impure for a moment and you have to become purified. Or touching a dead body isn't wrong. It doesn't make it sinful. People have to touch. If somebody dies, you have to move them. That doesn't make you. That's not a sin. What happens though is it makes you impure. And in this spectrum, you have two things according to Leviticus. You have holy, and you have common, and you have pure, and you have impure. And so God can only ever be holy and pure. And the problem is that humans make things impure. We do impure things. It's just naturally who we are. And so that's why the beauty of the Nazarite is that God is actually keeping him as pure as possible to be close to him as possible. Why stay away from wine? Because when you drink too much wine, you do stupid things. Paul talks about that. Paul says, would you rather be controlled by wine or be controlled by the Holy Spirit? You do stupid things when you're controlled by wine, but when you live by the Spirit, you're yielding to the Spirit and you do things biblically. And that's why I believe God is the Nazarite vow is keeping Samson, the idea is closest to holiness and purity to serve God, essentially.
Let me just come in here and fast forward to New York City 2024 when we go on Encounter.
Yes.
We'll walk the streets of New York, and there's a lot of Hasidic Jewish people there. And the men, when they see women coming towards them, will actually cross the street. They act, it has been interpreted very snotty, very, it's annoying. Wait, what do they think? I'm chopped liver? Why can't they see a woman and they cross the street? The reason is that they don't want to get mixed up in any kind of trouble.
Yep.
They don't want to become impure. They don't want evil thoughts. They don't. Now, I'm just saying this text actually helps us when we take groups on Encounter. They learn about this and understand, wait a minute, there is this separation within Judaism. It comes out of biblical Judaism. We don't, here at Friends of Israel, we don't believe that that's what we need to do, but the Hasidic Jew does.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, Neil.
No, that's Steve, actually a great lead in to chapter 14. Why don't you read verses 1 and 2?
Now Samson went down to Timnah and saw a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. So he went up, told his father and mother, saying, I've seen a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. Now, therefore, get her for me as a wife. Sounds like a what is that, Generation Z? I want that. Get that for her. Or millennial. Get that. I want that.
Can I say something too? It's amazing because they give him all this setup of a Nazarite vow, and the guy goes and breaks rule number 1 right. It's not even close to a Nazarite vow.
It doesn't take long.
It doesn't take long. And even what's scary about what's happening in Israel here, when it says that he went down to Timnah and he saw one of the daughters of the Philistines, you get the impression that now the Israelites and the Philistines are living, commingling, moving in and out. And you get this sense that Israel has made this kind of acceptance. We live with these people. Now we're just going to try to keep the peace. And it actually says in this story that God was working with Samson's weaknesses to try to break that marriage between Israel and the Canaanites. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, is Timnah in Israel? This is a question I have. Is Timnah in Israel, or is Timnah in the Philistine city? And if it's a Philistine city, it makes an interesting question. Is Samson going down there to defeat the Philistines, but gets caught off guard because he sees this woman? Is he down there to do what God called him to do? And he's like, you know what? Scratch this. Look at that lady. I like her. But Neil, maybe you can give us, you were just teaching on this, so maybe you can give us some better insight into that.
I'm not sure, Chris. I do think that what the author of the story is trying to point out is just now Israel's just, and the Philistines, remember, Philistines are in charge, but it seems like Israel's just got some freedom to wander around here and connect with them. When he says, Steve, you made me laugh when he says, now get her for me as my wife. I want to say a pastoral thing here. Just this comes to my mind as we're entering this time of the year that's really hard for a lot of people. You're introduced here to Samson's lack of self-control, his lack of emotional regulation, his immaturity, his sexual addiction. And I think it'd just be good to say, right now, this time of year, all these kinds of things become hard when people are feeling lonely and we eat too much, drink too much, whatever it is, right? And when I look at Samson here, I say, he needs a ministry that we have at our church called Celebrate Recovery.
That's true. That's a good one,
it's just a 12-step Christ-centered recovery program. And I just think, gosh, we don't have to be like Samson. And the whole story is to say, don't be like him. And so if, any of our listeners are struggling, maybe they could find a church where there's a recovery program that they can go into. I'm so thankful for the one at our church. So
that's
just a little.
I know that Celebrate Recovery too. That's a big ministry at Northwest. It's a great one as well.
So Samson's mother and father, they say, dude, don't do this. Why are you going to the uncircumcised Philistines? And Samson just says to his father, get her for me, for she is right in my eyes.
Yeah. Yep.
What's that make us think about?
The whole book.
Yes. Everyone was doing what was right in their own eyes. And if you go to verse 7, it's repeated. Then he went down and talked with the woman, and she was right in Samson's eyes. You guys, a good storyteller is going to use repeated phrases, right? Saying, hey, I hope you're getting this. This guy is a problem. This is not good. And, sometimes people ask me, they just read the story and they think God is okay with the story, right? And we have to keep telling people this is not what's being prescribed. This is just what God is describing here. But the story is told in such a way that a Jewish reader would know beyond a shadow of doubt.
Mm-hmm.
This ain't good, right?
I like what you mentioned there, because Samson's life kind of becomes with all the other judges, it seems like God saying Israel's doing what they want in their own eyes, and God raises up a judge and defeats the people, and that's the story. You're kind of getting a microcosm. You're kind of going from 30,000 feet down into the forest now, and you're seeing how even a judge that's been called, set apart, is engaging in the exact same thing. Like we were saying, it's kind of telling you the story by giving you a personal story of how even it was spoken from their own. It wasn't just God saying they're doing what's right in their own eyes. They're saying, I like this because I like what I see and I'm doing what I want to do. Like he's telling you.
Now, lots of us, Chris, know the story about Samson killing a lion, right? He kills this lion. He then goes back to the lion's
Yep.
corpse, and he sees some bees are there with some honey, and he goes in and he gives some to his parents. And it actually says in the text he didn't tell his parents.
Mm-hmm.
Which again, there's a problem. And it's what you said earlier, Chris. He didn't purify himself. What you would have expected was that Samson, after killing the lion or getting these bees and this honey, that he took kind of a time out.
Yep.
And he would do this complex ritual of cleansing and purification as a good Nazarite who's taking serious God's grace and God's call.
So we're seeing that Samson has an issue with a woman, and now he has an issue with food. He can't help himself. He's got to have this thing right now. He's got an impulsive personality. Impulsive.
Yeah. He also likes to gamble.
Go on.
Yes.
Well, he likes to gamble. He had further on in the chapter 14, Neil.
Verse 14.
Yep. So he has a contest where he wants to tell them a riddle, and if they could guess the riddle, then he'll give them clothing, and if they can't get it, then they give it to him. And then we have a crying woman who cries 7 days. I can't even imagine that. 7 days of crying would make me crazy. But Pastor Neil, I'll turn it over to you to explain. He had a gambling issue.
Yeah. Steve, what's so interesting about this, we're told that his parents, they finally just give in to their son. They arrange the wedding. They get these 30 companions who are apparently Philistines. And again, I just think about where our culture is going right now. It's so sad. A 16-year-old child says, hey, I'm thinking this way and I'm feeling this. And their parents say, oh, okay, maybe we'll change what we're doing. And that's exactly what his parents do here.
Yep.
It's really sad. And so he makes that bet. And Steve, read verse 14 because it's a great little riddle. Go ahead, read it.
So he said to them, out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet. Now, for 3 days, they could not explain the riddle.
Can I just say, what are the odds? This is a Hebrew that's Hebrew, but it ends up rhyming in English. What?
Yes.
I mean, God is he's good. Good poem. Good
all
riddle.
the time.
And so finally, his wife just works on him to tell the answer, and she finally does. And like Steve said, this guy's impulsive. He gets really hacked off. And Steve, why don't you read verse 19 to see how Samson responds once the guys tell the riddle and he's got to get him some clothes.
Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon him mightily, and he went down to Ashkelon and killed 30 of their men, took their apparel, and gave the changes of clothing to those who had explained the riddle. So his anger was aroused, and he went back up to his father's house. He's angry. He's gambling. He's not drinking yet, but I'm sure that's coming soon. That's coming too.
No, you know what? When it describes the party earlier, it sounds like it was probably drinking included.
There you go.
Yep.
You're right.
He needs Celebrate Recovery now for his anger and his gambling and everything else.
Ay.
I think we do have to say something here. It's interesting, Samson, as out of control as this guy is, multiple times it says the Spirit of the Lord came on him.
Yes.
And in, verse 19 there, when it says the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and then he goes and kills 30 random guys to take their clothes, there is an interesting interplay with God's Spirit coming on Samson and Samson using God's power for his selfish, impulsive, good word, Steve, vindictive ends, right?
Mm.
And again, is God putting his stamp of approval on this? No. And somehow God is still working through that mess to create a wedge between his people and the Philistines. Well, the story goes on, and it becomes very interesting that God's people actually don't like this wedge, and the Philistines start working over the Israelites. So 3,000 Israelites get up, and instead of going after the Philistines, they come after Samson, their deliverer.
Yeah.
And that's really important, because this is one of the things we see in the story, that Israel, as they're going downhill, they move from just fighting enemies outside of themselves to battling themselves, which is
And what's
really
what's your line for that again, Neil? That you like, it's kind of the theme of how you've been preaching this message. That when you don't follow God, there was a line that you gave. What was that again?
As God's people trust God less and less and less, sin, pain, disunity, dysfunction increases more and more and more, and here you have it.
Yeah, it's interesting because you use that word disunity, and that's it right there. When you see that internal civil unrest within Israel, when the enemies out there, the enemy is watching them destroy themselves from within.
Yes. And so these 3,000 guys, they come to Samson, and Samson says, "Hey, listen, tie me up, just don't kill me." So they tie Samson up, and they take him to the Philistines to drop him off. And so let's go to chapter 15. Steve, you want to read verses 14 and 15?
Sure. When he came to Lehi, the Philistines came shouting against him. Then the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and the ropes that were on his arms became like flax that is burned with fire, and his bonds broke loose from his hands. He found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, reached out his hand and took it, and killed 1,000 men with it.
Jawbone of a donkey.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
Here Samson is violating his calling and God's grace right and left.
With the weapon he uses.
Yes. And Samson's cocky. He's really cocky at this point. In verse 16, there's some interesting words in the Hebrew. Verse 16, Samson, it's almost like the guy who won a football game and he's dancing in the end zone, okay? Samson says, with the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of a donkey have I struck down 1,000 men. The word heaps there in Hebrew, same word as donkey. It's like Samson saying, with the jawbone of a donkey, I've made donkeys out of them.
Yeah. And it's so funny because the Lord is supposed to be the one who does this on behalf of Samson. And now Samson's giving himself the credit, and he touched a corpse, took a bone, and did it himself, and basically said, God who?
Yeah. And really, Samson is behaving in a violent way, just like the culture around him. In some ways, he's just a sellout to the culture. And it's just a reminder to me that we constantly have to look at our own lives and say, how am I living just like the culture?
Mm-hmm. Neil, with the time that we have remaining,
Okay.
I want to make sure that we wrap the story up, but I want to also, I want to make sure we have a moment to talk about the unrealized potential for us, because I'm seeing it in my life too. This is, you're touching on all the right points here in Samson's life. Can you wrap the story up front, and let's talk about that unrealized potential? I want to know what you are leaving with your church that you can leave with our listeners today. Okay, so I'm going to fast forward, Chris, the story of Samson and Delilah.
We got songs written about it. And, you know, ultimately, he tells the source of his strength. He has his hair cut. And it's interesting when he wakes up, when Delilah says, the Philistines are upon you, Samson says, I'll just go out as I've done before, as I have done before.
Mm-hmm.
And we know they gouge out his eyes, and he becomes a grinder in the mill. You talk about unrealized potential. Here is God's judge, called by God's grace, and he's a grinder in the mill. And finally, you get to this point where Samson, he ends up getting his strength back as his hair grows. He pulls down these pillars as he's now entertaining the Philistines, and they're praising their God because they think they've won the battle. And when Samson dies, here's what happens. It says he died. They went and buried him. He judged Israel for 20 years. And there's something that's missing. It never says the land got rest. And boom, there you have the end of Judges. And Chris, this is why I say, man, Samson is not a nice little story for kids or a nice story to say, let's be a father like Samson or a man like Samson. It is the story of unrealized potential. And here's the application, Chris. Here's the two things. What did Samson do? He ignored God's grace and he ignored God's call. So I'll say it this way. For us, we want to have unrealized potential. The Spirit of God, like we've said in week 1, lives inside of us. Be complacent about the grace of God in your life and be complacent about the call of God in your life. Remember, even the church, ecclesia, means what? Called out ones. Mm-hmm. That we have actually been called out. This is not a popular idea in our culture, right? You know, Paul said, hey, your body is not your own. That's one of the big mantras of our culture. Your body is your own. Samson did what Samson wanted to do. Be complacent about God's grace. Be complacent about God's call. So I'll let y'all comment on that.
No, it's true. When you are complacent, exactly as Samson was, you miss out on what you wonder for a moment. You know, you almost have to remove yourself from the story and think for a second. I wonder what Samson would have been like if he had followed God in all of these things. What would his life what would it have looked like? You know, what could it have done for Israel? Because, you know, think about what Neil said earlier, is the way that leaders go is the way that the people go. Samson was supposed to be a leader of the people, a judge of the people, and he ended up becoming an enemy of his own people. And so you just wonder, you know, you talk about that potential, you know, God still used him. There's no doubt about that. God used him in that moment. It's a very famous account in the Bible. But at the same time, it just makes me go, I wonder what he could have been like had he fulfilled the vow that he had made to God.
Because, Chris, God used him, but he did not bring rest to Israel.
100%. That's right.
Steve, what were you going to say?
Oh, no, I just look at Samson and, as you already described, compromise with the culture. And I'm not excusing him, but at the same time, it's always we see it all the time. We see it all the time, and we need to strengthen the brethren and the sisters. And this kind of story is, you know, I wonder, Neil, how many of us in our churches have heard Samson more in a positive way than in the negative way we're talking about him now? It's because, you know, he won the day at the end.
Yeah, he won the day. That's right.
But it's not emphasized that there was no peace.
Yep.
And he was to be, in essence, the savior.
Mm-hmm.
He was to save his people, and his mission failed. But because it's such a grand, his hair grew. He's strong. He pulled the pillars. Dagon goes down. They all go down, and everything's great. But it really isn't.
I was doing a lesson on Colossians, and I was reading this commentary on it, and Paul is trying to argue to the Colossian church that your body does what you do with your body as a believer matters. A lot of times, and he was fighting against that culture around him that was saying, the body means nothing. The Greek culture said body means nothing. It's destined for destruction. It's, it'll be in the ground. It's corruptible, but the soul is good and it's heavenly. And so, whatever happens to the body, who cares? But the soul is what matters the most. In Judaism, in the Bible, the Jewish book, the Jewish Bible, the body and the soul are meant to be together. That's when God said this is good. When he created Adam, it wasn't that the soul was just good and the body, who cares? It's that the two together as one are what God created. And so it's interesting because Paul is arguing what you do with your body in a pagan world where he's ministering, in a culture like that, it does matter. The way you treat your body, as you had mentioned earlier, your body is a temple. The way that Samson was living as my kids would say, nonchalant. That's what the big word they use. Nonchalant about what he does. And actually, Paul argues, no, what you do as a believer indwelt with the Holy Spirit, what you do with your body does matter to God. It does matter. So it's an interesting thing there.
Steve, you made me think of this. Samson won a battle but lost the war.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a closer, Chris, for us. Just thinking New Testament, we need a fresh dose of Ephesians 2, 8, 9, and 10. By grace, you've been saved through faith, not of yourselves. It is a gift of God, not as a result of works that anybody should boast. God, again, overwhelm us with your grace as we look at the cross of Jesus and what has been done for us. And then verse 10, the call. We are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand for us to do. That we don't get to say, I just do whatever I want to do. That's Samson, and that's Israel at the time.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Hey, listen, if you've enjoyed this study that we've been doing on Judges, Neil's only touching on 3 of the judges. We looked at Othniel. We looked at, who did we look at last week? Who was it last week? Well, who did we look at last week? Was it Neil? Do you forget?
We looked at
Shamgar, wasn't it?
No,
we looked at the middle guy.
Japheth, right? Or is it? Who did we look at? I'm blanking.
Our listeners are
maybe I
laughing their heads
just
off.
turned to my Bible.
Yeah. We looked at Othniel. We looked at
Gideon.
We forgot Gideon.
I
I
forgot
keep
about
wanting to say Micah. We looked at Gideon.
I don't know. All right, to our listeners, we apologize. They turned us off in that moment.
Brain freeze.
Yeah, so we looked at Othniel, we looked at Gideon. This week we looked at Samson, but what I was trying to tell you is you can go to northwestbible.org.
We better go there.
Yeah, exactly. To get a full look at the book of Judges as Neil is leading his church through that. It's all available. They do a great job with the video and the audio. You can click on that and watch Neil and go through that series.
Much better than our tech.
All right, Pastor Neil, thank you so much. You're more than welcome to stick around for the news, but if not, we want to wish you a very, very, very happy Thanksgiving. We're thankful for you, and we wish we had 1,000 Pastor Neils with a heart for Israel and the Jewish people like you have, passion for God's word and compassion for his people. Thank you, Pastor Neil.
Hey, thank you guys. What a privilege to get to be with y'all, and I'm going to be signing off and getting ready for our 30 people coming over for Thanksgiving.
All right, enjoy that. Give your best to your wife. Thank you so much, brother. Talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.
All right, Steve, so that was great.
That was great.
He did a fantastic job. We're so thankful for Pastor Neil and his ministry to his church and how he blesses us. Steve, we are coming upon Thanksgiving here. I had mentioned to our chapel the other day that I had pizza. I was offered a pizza that's a Thanksgiving pizza. It has turkey and stuffing and cranberry sauce.
Didn't sound appetizing.
So you could get that. I said, no, thank you. I just want the normal pizza. But we're talking about Thanksgiving. And of course, people are always trying to change meaning and change the way things are tradition.
Yep.
Go ahead,
This comes from Breitbart.com. The headline, University at Buffalo hosts a forum to discuss decolonizing Thanksgiving. They want to remove Thanksgiving. The University at Buffalo in New York held a decolonizing Thanksgiving event last week, which questions if it was right to celebrate Thanksgiving. Now, just think about Thanksgiving and the United States. Now, I get it. I understand the idea of in Canada First Nation or the Indian culture, all that I understand. But when you read, do we have a right to celebrate Thanksgiving? Yes, we
100%.
have a right to celebrate Thanksgiving. We should celebrate. We should have more than one day a year to devoted to Thanksgiving. But Chris, what do you think of the way we're the average person celebrating Thanksgiving? You know, we call it Turkey Day.
Mm-hmm.
We call it Football Day in America. That's what we call it. Lots of different things.
It's the same thing we've done with Christmas. We've materialized it. We've changed the culture has changed the approach. We did it to Easter, to Resurrection Sunday. It's now candy and a bunny and all that. But you know, can I say something here? Because sometimes it's the result too that matters of what Thanksgiving has come to mean. It says here in the article. It says, is it right to celebrate Thanksgiving and American history of settler colonialism? The description of the event said, what can we do to honor this day of mourning for Native communities? We can redefine the meaning of Thanksgiving and respect indigenous peoples' history. And so they go on and they say in 2021, the IDC, which I don't know exactly what the Intercultural Diversity Center, IDC, held an event titled The Real History of Thanksgiving, which described the holiday as whitewashed and discussed alternatives for Americans to do in place of Thanksgiving according to campus reform. Okay, here's the thing, Steve. Let's just say that their history is right. Is that the way that we celebrate Thanksgiving today? That's what I'm so confused. The whole point of Thanksgiving is to show the moment when the Pilgrims and the Native Americans came together under the banner of thankfulness and joined together in unity, no matter what maybe the outcomes might have been. And I'm not sure of them. Maybe somebody else is more versed in this. But today, what do we do? I mean, when I grew up, I celebrated, I learned the culture from my public school that it's something where the point is it's not exclusive. It's everybody's welcome to the table.
What's the number one thing? It doesn't matter, Christian, Jewish, Muslim. When Americans who celebrate Thanksgiving, there usually is one question they ask before they eat. They might not pray, but they always ask, do you know the question?
What are you thankful for?
What are you thankful? And everybody goes around. I remember my kids rolling their eyes because we did it and still do it every year. What are you thankful for? And you had to think of something that you're thankful for, and depending on where you are in the line.
Oh, yeah, you got to be creative.
You got to find something you're thankful for that somebody else didn't already say. It becomes difficult. What in the world is wrong with that? I don't find anything.
Well, it's just interesting because I do think the woke mentality is that I believe and I know that when you go back hundreds of years, yes, racism was real.
100%.
Yes, it was not the perfect world that
it's still not a perfect
That's right.
world.
It wasn't the utopia that they want to create. And so they go back in time and they what they're doing is undoing the work of all the amazing decades and centuries of trying to create an environment that is welcoming for all people. Instead of looking at it and saying, look how far we've come, they look back and go, look at that thing. It was a whitewash story, this, that, the other. When the reality is today, I think, who's coming to Thanksgiving? I don't care who it is, what friends you bring, whatever. I hope that we have a great time and we give thanks to the Lord for what's going on.
Absolutely. And the idea, if we're waiting for the world to become perfect before we can thank God or be thankful, we're in big trouble.
Hey, in that message that I gave on the Thanksgiving offering from Leviticus 7, I had read this to the chapel this morning, but I always think it's fascinating that within the Talmud, the rabbis say that all sacrifices will cease in the kingdom to come, the Messianic age, but one sacrifice.
That's a great point.
The thanksgiving, the Todah offering. We will always be giving thanks to God for who he is and what he's done in our lives. All right, Steve, we got one more here. And if it's not enough that poor Canada's postal system is... Oh, wait, that's right. We have to talk about that one. Before we do that, can we go to this one?
Yes.
We have one more after this. It's not enough that the postal system in Canada has been shut down because of a strike.
Terrible.
Pitney Bowes, Steve. Pitney Bowes.
Don't tell me that. Don't tell me that.
Okay, but anyway, that's an inside joke. In Quebec, over 85,000 students strike for Gaza, call for intifada, and final solution. Steve, maybe you want to take it from there.
Well, Quebec was flooded with pro-Palestinian protests as 85,000 students with 13 university campuses went on strike for 2 days. And when they did, Chris, there was all kinds of, there were 85,000 strikers, 11,000 were from Concordia, who were coordinated by 11 student groups, one faculty group. A protest leader led a chant saying, "Listen to the ICC," which comes just after the court announced arrest warrants against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. And so they burnt cars, Chris. It was not even a necessarily peaceful demonstration, but they were all against Israel once again.
Yeah, the campus riots and protests that we see in America with the situation going on with Israel and Hezbollah and Hamas, it's not just confined to America. You can see how bad it is here with 85,000 Quebecan students striking for Gaza, call for intifada and final solution.
Our Canadian reps who live in Canada, they're very concerned about this. It's not just in Quebec and in Montreal. It's in various provinces around Canada, and it's getting worse. And Canadians, Bible-believing Canadians, are very, very concerned.
All right, Steve, we meant to do this one last week.
Yeah, this one, Chris.
This is, if there is any good reason to stick around for Neil's teaching and now to stick around for the news, this one is almost, it borders on the comedic, Steve.
J-Post, this is from the Jerusalem Post. I caught this headline, and it made me laugh and cry at 100%. The same time. Here's the headline: "A disgusting Jew. Uproar after Netflix casts a Jewish Israeli actress to play Mary, Jesus' mom."
That's right. Noah Cohen, a 21-year-old...
I mean, I can't even blurt it out. It's too crazy.
Noah Cohen, a 21-year-old Israeli actress, portrays the world's most famous Jewish mom in the movie. You know what? I give credit to the Jerusalem Post for highlight. I never thought of it like that. Who is the most famous Jewish mother in the world? Miriam. I never even, again, you always like to highlight Jewish people invented this. Jewish people have the most famous mother in the world, and her name is Miriam.
He had a Yiddish mama.
That's right. Noah Cohen, a 20-year-old Israeli actress, portrays the world's most famous Jewish mom in the movie, but some social media users are calling for a boycott. Steve,
They want to boycott a Jewish mother of a Jewish Messiah because a Jewish person is playing her.
Well, this is because the pro-Palestinian movement has created a narrative that Jesus is actually Palestinian. And we can chuckle at it, but it's like chuckling at Holocaust denial. You can only laugh at it so long until finally you begin to realize, oh, wait a minute, this is spreading. Like when one guy gets up and says it never happened, you go, this guy's crazy. But when it becomes a part of the curriculum that students are learning in school and colleges or, wherever you might go, now all of a sudden it's not a laughing matter. Now you got to get busy undoing the fact that you were laughing at it for so long. You can laugh at this. Like you said, it's almost laughable but you start crying thinking about it. It's because the pro-Palestinian movement has created this narrative that Jesus is a Palestinian. He was living under the oppression of the Romans. He just as the Palestinians are living under the oppression of the Israelis. That's the way they paint this picture. Jesus born in Bethlehem, a Palestinian town. And it is a Palestinian town today. All of these little things they try to do to give you this picture that, oh, your faith in Jesus is not in a Jewish Messiah. It's almost a Palestinian Messiah. And all that is grounded in an actual theology, a way of reading the Bible called Palestinian Liberation Theology, PLT, Palestinian Liberation Theology.
And
you
you went to a meeting several years ago sponsored by them as interest to write for Israel My Glory magazine.
Many years ago, Lorna Simcox and a team of people from Friends of Israel went to an event that was a pro-Palestinian event that was pushed by an organization that held to Palestinian liberation theology, which argues this: we read the Bible through our Palestinian eyes and not through what actually the Bible teaches us. There's a difference. One is called exegesis. We get that information from the text, so we read it from the text. And one is called eisegesis, what we read into the text. And so they are reading into the text their Palestinian plight. And by doing that, they rework all of these narratives in the Bible to give the Palestinian people basically a replacement theology perspective. We are the ones suffering now. We are the Israel of today, when in reality, the Bible has always been a very pro-Israel, pro-Jewish Bible through and through. And that's the issue that they have. They can't handle the fact that the Bible is so Israel focused. So
you know, Chris, denying past historical events in their facts is bad enough, but we see it played out in modern times. October 7th happened. We know, we have it on video. It can be seen. We know exactly what happened. And yet there are people, if you talk, you could check it out, depending on who you talk to, there are people who deny it happened and just say Israel as an aggressor has gone into Gaza. There's no reason why they should have, and they're committing genocide.
Yep.
They're telling the exact opposite of what actually happened, even though there's video proof. So you have...
And a chart showing that over the course of the last 15 years, the population of the Palestinians in Gaza has like doubled, maybe even quadrupled. And everyone's laughing at that chart saying it's a pretty backwards genocide if you end up with more people than what you started with.
Exactly. So,
all right, well, that was great. Steve, I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to get to that last week, but I'm glad we could pick it up this week. But we are thinking about our Yiddish word of the day.
Yes, and we were thinking of Samson and Pastor Neil, and when we think of he wanted his girl now.
Yeah.
He wanted his girl now. So I looked up a Yiddish word. I never heard it before. My parents never used it, but I know that they would understand what a hothead is.
Yep.
You know what a hothead is?
Oh, yeah.
Easily angered. Hitsiger.
Wait, say it again.
Hitsiger.
Hitsiger?
Hitsiger. Hitsiger.
Hitsiger.
Samson was a Hitsiger.
Oh, yeah. Don't be a Hitsiger. Don't be like Samson.
Don't be a hothead.
Be a mensch. Don't be a Hitsiger.
Be a mensch.
That's
I
right.
like it.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much for being a part of the Jew and Gentile podcast. Happy Thanksgiving. Steve and I just want to say how thankful we are for our 7 listeners. I know you're out there thinking, yeah, I'm the 8th. No. You are the 7th. We're keeping it that way, everybody. Hey, we want to give you stickers. Text us at 424-1948. Give us your name and your address. We'll get those stickers out to you. 50 stickers. We're going to have to order some more soon. And hey, you know what? We're asking. Why are we asking? Because we believe that FOI Equip is doing amazing work to spread the good news of Jesus, the Jewish Messiah, and we want you to be a part of that. So we're raising $25,000 before the end of the year. Go to foiequip.org, register for your free class, sign up for free Jewish ministry training, take all the free stuff we give, but hey, would you give to make this ministry possible? Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.